I came up with that title, and I still have no idea what that means.
Well, I think it's a good thing that we switched to a new one. Then.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's a good thing we're doing a different presentation.
About that, are we starting now? Is it time?
We can get started. Yeah, can you guys hear me in the back if I'm this close? Cool.
So we can obviously touch points on the existing IP-based games like we were supposed to. Unfortunately, some things have changed, so one of the panelists who would be here is not going to be here or isn't here. So tough luck. So we had rejiggered the topic a little bit to bootstrapping, which I think you see above me. Yeah?
That's
No?
right.
Okay. There you go. So which is more of a generalized focus. We can obviously touch some of the more specific points about TV and film-based stuff. But we kind of expanded it in the notion that one of the two people involved in those kind of things, besides myself, won't be here. So take it away, Ross.
Okay, so I always start panels with introductions. My name is Ross Hersemann. I'm a video game attorney from Chicago, Illinois. I work with the Video Game Art Gallery and also the Chicago Bar Association Creative Arts Committee. My law practice is called Loading Law, and I work with independent video game developers with their IP needs, business startup needs, and anytime they need to talk to a lawyer, usually they're talking to me.
My name's Keith Blake. I run Playview Games and the CLE Game Co-op. I also run that massive thing you might see out there. Did I just lose the mic? Called the hashtag Games in CLE Mega Booth. And yeah, that's about it.
And my name is Tom Caprel. I own two companies. One is a marketing company called Helios Capital Research, where we study video game economies and produce services for developers as well as game players to better use them. I own a marketing company called Hyperion Marketing, and we work with companies in game development, software development, and the entertainment industry to help them do general marketing, including the in-between for thought leadership. And I'm also the marketing director at the VGA Gallery with Ross.
Cool. So first, how many of you are game developers? How many of you are video game fans or entrepreneurs? Okay. How many of you know what intellectual property is? Everybody. This is going to go really smoothly. Nice. Fantastic. So I want to get started by talking about a couple of the legal considerations involved in starting any business, and specifically starting a video game studio. The first things that you generally want to do as a developer, and the developers in the room know this, is you want to put your team together. You want to have a group of dedicated individuals who, most importantly, before anything else, are able to communicate efficiently with each other and communicate their goals for what they want to do. Communicating with your team members about what kind of game you want to make, how you want to sell that, if you want to sell it, how you're going to distribute the rights in that work is the most important conversation you're ever going to have as a game developer or any entrepreneur. Knowing your team members and managing the expectations of your team members so that you can kind of succeed together, very, very important. If you don't have that, you don't have anything. So following that, when you have that conversation, you're going to start outlining your business goals. You're going to start getting into, if you're hoping to make a profit, the best way to do that. And usually, most of the developers that I work with, the first thing that they decide they want to do is they want to form some kind of corporation or limited liability company to shield themselves from liability. When you're putting together a game, you're going to be conducting a lot of business. You're going to be writing contracts, you're going to be writing checks, you're going to be marketing, you're going to be advertising, you're going to be interacting with people in all different fields of business you never thought you'd be meeting with. That might be meeting with attorneys, that might be meeting with accountants, that could be press, marketers, YouTube personalities. You're going to be talking to a lot of different people. And in that process, you're going to have to manage what your message is. And also you're going to have to manage how you're financing all of that. So you don't want all of those responsibilities to fall on you personally, in a legal sense or in a personal sense. You want to kind of share the load with the team you're working with, and you want to share the liability of all of those interactions with a company so that it doesn't fall on you. So that if you come into an instance where the game is not as successful as you hoped, or if you have to pivot to something else, all of a sudden the numbers aren't adding up the way that you hoped, it's not going to be your mortgage, your house, your family that you're worrying about. It's going to be the company's. So forming an LLC or an S-Corp is usually the first thing that teams will do. Personally, I usually recommend limited liability companies for small game developers because they're the easiest to set up, they're the most versatile and easiest to adapt because independent game developers change their games quite a bit and their structures as well. People come and leave projects. And it's also one of the least expensive ways to do it. I believe in Ohio it's about $100 to set up an LLC. And once you get that all set, you can start going for all the other business aspects you have to handle as a company. You can start getting your federal tax ID so that you can start paying your employees, and you can start putting together all of your business contracts. Now, your business contracts are any number of things. A lot of the developers in the room, you've probably used some already. Just how many people have used a contract that they found online and kind of customized it themselves? None of you? I'm shocked. Okay, 1, 2. I'm not going to turn you in. Like, I'm not going to have you arrested or anything. That's totally fine. How many folks have a lawyer or an accountant put together contracts for them if they use contracts? Good number. That's usually the best way to go. I can't say that using a contract you find online is a horrible idea all the time. Sometimes contracts can be really simple and you can use something you find online. But anytime you're doing something a little bit more complicated or a little bit unusual that's like particularly suited to your business, and that's a lot of the time because video games are very unique, you might want to start looking at personalizing your contracts, either getting them from your accountant, your lawyer, or some other business person, because that's going to be the most efficient for what your business is. So after you put your company together, after you incorporate, after you start getting into your contracts, the next legal issue you're probably going to start looking into is if you're making a game, you're going to be worried about intellectual property. You're going to start looking at copyrights, you're going to start looking at trademarks, potentially even right of publicity, depending on your game. All of those things are things you should discuss with a professional, either a lawyer or an accountant. Don't try to handle them yourselves. They seem like they're easy to do. They seem like they just require simple information, but there's a lot of legalese in them that you should really let a professional look at. Trademarks are always very important. If you're starting a company, you want to make sure that people know where your branding has come from and where the source of your goods are. And I think that's probably a pretty good transition for, got through all of that. I'm going to hold it there for 3 seconds just so you can read it, but I just covered it a little bit. But going through branding is probably a pretty good transition for kind of the next step, which is financing your projects once you have them, and then also marketing them. I'm going to make you guys fight for it. Who's going to talk about Kickstarter? Who's going to talk about marketing and branding?
I think the marketing slide is the next one, though.
Is it the next one?
I think it is.
Like this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I was going to say, I don't know much about financing. I've never been good at finances. I'm not a finance person.
What's that? We can step back.
Yeah, I think, is that...
So, I have the unfortunate experience to be dealing with all of these, and all of them have their own pitfalls and benefits. You hear a lot about Kickstarter. Kickstarter is fantastic. It's used by a lot of small teams, especially in order to raise the funds ahead of time. The issue is what happens before it, what happens during it, what happens after it. And specifically in the games industry, there's been a large split in successful Kickstarters in terms of goals. We recently were planning for a large Kickstarter in terms of recent successes, and we found ourselves smack in the middle of the last year, 2 years worth of game-related Kickstarters. They diverged to either 100,000, 150, maybe more or less, more around 25K, 50K. These are the most popular ones you'll find, or they're huge ones that set their goals like $1 million or $2 million or more. For most of us, that's just ridiculous. You can't count on $1 million coming from your existing community or whatnot. So it's kind of impractical to go that route. But at the same time, some of our budgets, depending on who's involved, how many people are involved, whether you have legitimate artists, whether you have story writers or sound effects or an artist team, or whether you have anything special or any VR work or extra technician stuff, it might be very difficult to actually keep a budget down to about 100,000 or so. So we actually found ourselves smack in the middle at 250 and trying to figure out what to do. And in the research that I poured over for about a month or two, the most successful, the biggest tip I can give you about a successful Kickstarter is, I'm a really big data guy. All of the high successful or high goal Kickstarters that were actually successful spread out their pledge levels evenly. So the amount of people, or the amount of money they got from a $10 pledge versus $100 or $500 or $1,000 pledge was all about even. So 20% of theirs came from $1,000 or plus, 20% of them came from $20, and I can tell you that the numbers there are a little mismatched. You'll probably get like 1,000 people at $20, but the 5 people you get at $10,000 are just as important. So don't sell yourself short. So you can immediately tell by the fact that I went through all of this, and I have very specific data for you to provide tips from, that you should actually be spending a lot of time doing this. Don't expect a Kickstarter to actually be an easy thing. It may be very rewarding. It has specific benefits over investors, but it's going to take at least a month or 2 ahead of time, the month you run it, and the month after, at the very minimum, full-time, at least 1 person, more like 2 people would be better, plus the team of creating the actual art or awards or whatnot and fulfillment. It is not a small undertaking. Don't think that. Even if you're less than $100,000, take it very seriously. This is just the same type of approach you would take, or the same level of effort as if you were pitching to an investor themselves. You'd have to prepare your slide decks. You'd have to prepare your revenue projections. You'd have to prepare your budget and the outlooks and the potential ROI and so forth. So in terms of ease or workload, it is almost identical to the other options, which would be investors. Now, investors actually, having just gone through a very difficult Kickstarter, that would be a lot easier, actually. The difference is that with crowdfunding, obviously, you're not really indebted to the people other than making the game, hopefully, and making a really good game at that. That's about all they get. They get to be a part of it, which is fantastic. You don't need to give up anything. But with an investor, it's a very solid approach. It's we will give you this money to make this game. We get this amount for it, and that conversation is generally pretty short. It's a couple weeks back and forth, and you're done, and you're off making the game. As I said, Kickstarter at least 4 months, probably more, in order to just prepare and then raise the money. And then guess what? If you don't get it, you're screwed. You got to start over. You probably will have to turn back and go back and find an investor, anyways. So when people talk about Kickstarters, we're just going to Kickstart it. 1, that's a huge understatement. 2, you should solidly consider investor options when you're also considering Kickstarter, especially depending on your budget. If it's a low budget, you're just as likely to get that from a singular an investor group or something like that that might be interested in it. It's easier for them to do smaller numbers, where it's also easier for you to raise Kickstarter money for smaller numbers. So. I hear a lot of people talking about we're not going to bother with investors, we're just going to Kickstart it. I would recommend that you take both of those equally as seriously in terms of both benefits and time commitment.
Cool. So on the marketing side, one of the things that I always try to get across to people is that it's really important to know who your game is for. And I think a lot of people have this idea that anyone could play my game. It could apply to literally any audience on Steam. And I think the reality of it is always it's a bit different than that. And it takes a little bit of self-reflection and a little bit of kind of understanding of what you're putting together to understand where you need to go from a marketing perspective. It's going to be if you're pitching something to the fighting community or the fighting game community, it's going to be a lot different if you're pitching something to the creative Minecraft community. And it involves, a lot of that involves, I have to see what I wrote. A lot of it involves interacting with the thought leadership community in those different areas. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. Obviously, you need to be able to market yourself, and you need to be able to have some of the basics ready there. Really, one of the keys too is to really, it's a really important, and this almost goes a little bit more into the business coaching side, and with the companies that I've worked with, it's often very difficult to have some of those conversations, but it's very important to have those honest conversations about, okay, what really is the sales potential of what I've built? What is the sales potential of, what could I actually be looking at? Do I think that it's something that could really be picked up in X, Y, Z way? And that can be very difficult because in a lot of ways, it's your baby, right? I mean, it's like the projects that I put together. I don't want someone coming up and being like, hey, just so you know, this might not be what you're expecting. No one wants to hear that, of course. But the great part is that there are so many people out there who've put together really, really amazing things that marketing it becomes incredibly easy. So really, in a lot of ways, you have to understand your audience in a lot of different ways, whether that means connecting with them directly, whether, going to conventions and talking to people and saying, how do you find the games that you like? What's the most recent way that you found that? Because it's really amazing when you connect with people directly what they're willing to talk to you about. Hello. Or going online and finding out what those communities are looking at. Where are maybe it's not on Steam that they're necessarily finding them. Maybe they have their own. Maybe it's a subreddit. Maybe it's a different community that they've completely set up. And finding where those communities are interacting and what they're actually looking at and what they're talking about is a great way to understand the community you're engaging with. Because oftentimes, whether or not you're making a game in a community that you understand fully, it doesn't necessarily matter. I've seen tons of people make great games I've never tried making an RPG before, but they make a fantastic RPG, right? They may not necessarily be, huge, deep in the RPG community. And really, when I say that you need to pick a marketing strategy, it's when people think about that, it's very like, oh man, I have to put together a 40-page marketing report and do all this stuff. No, it's very, very simple. It's essentially choosing what activities are gonna make the biggest difference for you, and really that's all that is. Whether that's you always need the basics. If you're really committed to out there selling your game, or if you're really committed to really showing off what you have to offer as a product or even a service, you have to have a website. You just do. Whether it's for your game studio, whether it's for the game itself, you have to. You have to have at least one social media account. Because 40 years ago, 20 years ago, when 40 years ago, people would take a look and see, and they would take a look at information about businesses in the paper, or information about businesses in call them up in the yellow book. 10, 15 years ago, it was enough to have a website and be able to say oh, okay, yeah, sure. This company has a website. They're one of the first people that's really picking up on it. Even maybe 8 years ago. But now, part of the way that people examine legitimacy, and I think that kind of goes into customer trust a little bit, is by checking to see if they have a consistently updated social media profile. And I know that for a lot of people that's something that kind of comes naturally. You're like, yeah, of course I check that. I really am curious about it. But it's from a business perspective, it's hard to remember that that's one of the key ways that people expect you to interact with the community and show that you're committed to not just throwing your product into the world and expecting attention. It's that trust is a dialogue in a lot of ways. So you want to switch to the next one? Oh, you did. Oh man, God, you're so on top of it.
I'm on it, man. I'm
He's
watching you.
And I'm not sure if you guys ever heard of a book called Guerilla Marketing. Nice. So the book came out in I think 1984. It's literally almost 40 years old, and it is just as relevant today as it was back then. And this is something that one of the companies I work with is a consultancy, and they do small business consulting. And there's this other great book called The E-Myth. Have you guys ever heard of that? It's a book that essentially says that marketing hasn't actually changed that much, even with the internet. It's just the different platforms that still use the same thing. And it's really fascinating to see that those sort of things are just as important. So, if you guys are interested, I would highly check out those things. It gives a lot of very interesting and business and marketing background that are important, independent of the game development industry in general. But it's essentially you're trading your time and your effort for the potential to get sales is essentially what guerrilla marketing is, as opposed to what a large company could do, which was dump hundreds of millions of dollars into a marketing budget and then show you some amazing products. And really that's what it comes down to, and that's why you have to pick a good marketing strategy, because you only have a limited amount of time. And oftentimes, if you're a developer, it's only you or maybe one or two other people. Now, to help pitch with that is going to be you're going to interact with the thought leaders, and that's something that I really try to talk to people about a lot and what people are starting to understand is the value of we in the game industry really understand, YouTubers or Twitter thought leaders or people on Vine, Rip Vine, or other industries that are coming up that Reddit even, where certain people essentially have a lot of influence, and interacting with them can be kind of difficult. But it's also really critical now, because in my mind, in a lot of ways, that's where marketing is going. It's not going to be the IGNs that are going to be having all the answers before, and the thing that you go to. It's not the Nintendo magazine. It's these people who have developed these communities where that trust still exists, where you can look at them and go, yes, Total Biscuit, I trust everything that you say, and being able to look at that is one of the key ways that not only game developers interact with potential game communities, but even how companies now interact with their audiences in general, game industry or otherwise. Also, and I know that this is kind of like everyone understands it, but I always like to say it, never trust that going viral will actually do anything for you. And that really sucks, because I think a lot of people think that if I hit it big on YouTube, or if I get 1,000 retweets, everyone's gonna do the thing that I told them. No, sorry.
From experience, that will never happen.
Yeah. And if you are lucky enough to have that happen, that's awesome. It may not necessarily translate to sales, which is the other hard part too. Even if you have that happen, people may not still buy it. And so it's more about developing a dedicated community that engages with you and is really meaningful in the way they interact. And I always tell people it's better to have 100 people that consistently interact with you on Twitter than 100,000 followers that retweet you maybe once a week. It's amazing to see the difference in how that community and how creating your own thought leadership, whether or not that's just in one game, whether or not that's in the industry in general, can make a huge impact. So,
okay, I guess it's my turn. So this would be the bootstrapping part that we had to replace a little bit about. So building off of what was already said here a little bit, the most important things to being successful as an indie gamer in a small studio, which if you are an indie gamer in a small studio is a 99.9% chance that you're bootstrapping and you have very little funds to begin with. The first thing I can really suggest is that if you are starting a studio, if you're starting a game, which generally is what most people start when they even start a studio anyways, treat it like a business. Even if you're not a business person, even if you don't want to be a business person, even if you want to be that creative individual, that awesome indie gamer that just makes this sweet-ass game and everyone loves it, and you hit Metacritic scores that are amazing, and then they make a film about you, treat it like a business, even whatever. So because inevitably you're going to come up against a wall, and you need to think about things ahead of time, have a business approach to it, have a little bit of a plan, have there's a marketing plan like he's talking about, have a little bit of an accounting plan together. If you know what you're doing in terms of revenue projections, that's money. Do it. But treat it as much as a business as you can, especially at the outset, because it will help qualify things for you. And the most important one is you cannot make a game with no money. Period. At some point, you will run into a situation where you either could have or should have invested a little money to make it that much better. And on that note, a little money is better than no money, especially when bootstrapping. Even if it's just a few $1,000s, even a couple $100s, that makes a huge difference if you put it where it counts, which is generally in publishing and promotion. Right out of the gate, build that awareness as much as you can, and then you can push it with all your free mediums and all your friends and so forth. But having that little bit of a step up will be infinitely better than having none and having to do it all your own. Either you have some money or you have some time. And if you have to do the time, then your quality is going to be worse. If you're not an artist, you're not going to be able to develop it. But if you can hire somebody to do a very specific thing, or you can hire, put some Twitter ads out there or something like that, if you put it in the right place, that will be 100 times better in value than if you tried to do it on your own or if you didn't think about it ahead of time. Next is community, which apparently is a word has been said a lot here. But I'll say it a couple more times. Community, community, community.
Wait, what was that word again?
I think it was something about a TV show. Anyway, so community. When starting out, even if you have a $1 million budget, you should be thinking about community from day one. As soon as you sit down, you put a team together, you say, I'm going to make this game, regardless of what game comes out of it. You should be thinking about, how can I share this with other people? How can I share this concept art? This is a really great game idea. Maybe I should pitch this to somebody and get it out there. Because the longer you have to do that, the bigger of an audience you're going to build, and the more loyal and the more vocal that audience is going to be. If you wait until time to publish and you just focus on your game and you just focus on the things that you want to do, it's going to be too little too late, and you're going to have to then start it when the game is ready to publish. And guess what? That means that your initial publish is going to kind of suck. So start from day one. It gets infinitely easier when you do that. If your artist just came up with a new or awesome concept art and you're not even going to use it, post it. Like, throw it up everywhere. Don't be the person that thinks, like, I want to keep this really private and, we're going to surprise everybody with this. That's never going to work. You get a lot more out of sharing the little bits all the time, and you'll build an audience automatically of people who are like, this is really cool. I want to see what's coming out next. And then guess what? When it's time to actually publish it, you have an audience waiting for you to buy it, which then you don't have to do any work. You just say, here, guys, it's here. And then they give you the money, and you're good to go. But, again, if you don't think about that ahead of time, then you're basically shit out of luck come publishing. And that goes back to treat it as a business. Think about it ahead of time. It just takes a little bit of thought. Have regular periods where you sit down and say, okay, how has this changed in the last couple months? Are we still on track? Is this still what we want to do? Is the plan, however basic that is, still applicable, and stuff like that? Bundle your humble. I came up with this and I couldn't stop laughing.
That's clever, man. I love it.
This harks back to some of the stuff that Ross was talking about. When you're bootstrapping, you obviously don't have money, but I'll tell you right now, you need legal work, you need a lawyer. So this is when you have to be as humble as possible and beg, borrow, and possibly steal, but that probably won't work out, so just beg and borrow. Legal services, accounting services, anyone you know, any family member, anyone that might be friendly to you, anyone who wants to support you that might have those skill sets. Being too proud to ask for free services is going to shoot you in the foot every single day. And let me tell you, my feet are pretty shut up. So just get over yourself. I'm apparently a very proud person, a very stubborn person, I don't know why. And I had to come to this realization that there are certain things that I absolutely need and I absolutely cannot pay for. So I have to find a way to solve that problem. And that's just get over yourself, and you'll find that a lot of people do want to help you. It might be a time commitment. They might literally not be able to fit it in. Find somebody else. Somebody will be able to help you. They'll be able to refer you to somebody else, and 9 times out of 10, it'll still happen. You'll get exactly what you need, and you won't have had to shell out the X amount of dollars that you don't have in the first place. So one more thing, a community, did we mention that yet? Yeah, so if you're just getting started out in game development, even if you're not part of one, find a local community. Different from building your own community, find somebody to shoot the shit with at a local bar about your game. Show it off, play test, run it by somebody. Inevitably, if you make a game in the dark, you come out of the dark and you say, here's my game. Everyone's gonna be like, what's going on here? You will always get a different reaction from your potential players than you ever would have expected in the first place. So it's the mantra I always say with the co-op and all of our teams and all of our Andes is playtest, playtest, playtest. Get it in somebody's hands as frequently and often as possible. And part of that is finding a local community that you can always meet up with on a regular basis. We've created that and fostered that in Cleveland. It's actually been doing really well, and it's paid dividends already. And even if you don't have something local, there are plenty of online communities to do exactly the same thing. I can recommend both Ludum Dare and One Game a Month, especially if you're getting started, which are really helpful communities with people who just want to see you succeed. It's a raise all boats scenario, and that's again gonna pay off dividends in the end. Prepare for the long haul. No matter what you think, no matter what anybody tells you, a game will at least take 1 year to make, even if you're going full time. There will always be more. There will always be a point at which you got to cut off and just push it out the door. But do not expect you're going to make that game that's going to only take a couple months and and you're going to make a bunch of money from it. It will inevitably take at least 1 year. There will be pitfalls. There will be heights. There will be horrible times where you're like, why in the world am I wasting my time doing this? And that harks back to the community, because you need somebody to tell you, no, this is actually pretty awesome, before you say, I'm going to set it on fire in the backyard. Putting that all together in a final sentence here, it's missteps are costly. I've been doing this for 20 years. I didn't have a community in the beginning. I made many, many mistakes. I didn't start a community for my audience in the beginning. I made many mistakes. I was not humble, and I made many mistakes. And I thought I could get away with zero budget. And I made many mistakes. So if you have people like, I always offer my services and my experience to anyone who wants it. People who have done it before, made the mistakes, gone through it, gotten through it, succeeded, not succeeded, because at least you know what not to do. Talk to as many people as you can and take their advice seriously, take their path seriously. If they made a misstep, don't brush it off and say, oh, I'm going to do the same thing and I'll do it differently. Take a minute and figure out why that didn't work for them and find a better way to do it. I've seen a couple people already. I tell them one exactly thing. I did this very wrong. I did it. I corrected it, and I did this right. This is what you should do. Figure it out. Do it for yourself. And they go and do the exact same thing wrong, and they come back to me and say, "What happened?" And I say, "I just told you not to do that. I did it myself. This wasn't me being some, egotistical something. I made the mistake. Please do not make that same mistake. It's costly, and it set me back months, and it set them back months. So, learn from as many people as you can. Again, be as humble as you can, and ask for help as often as you can, and you'll get a lot out of it. You'll be miles ahead of anybody else who doesn't."
That might actually be the best segue ever, because it's 4 o'clock and we've got about 15 minutes left for questions. So we want to hear from all of you. Feel free to ask us about anything we got into today. Also on IP-based games, if you have any questions about our original panel topic, come on down, let us know.
In general, it's a cliche at this point. You should start with friends and family, because those are the people who are invested in your success. And even if it's a little bit of money, again, bootstrapping, it'll get you a lot further. And their expectations of return are just seeing you happy, and that's free. So let me tell you, do it. And then if it's great, it's great. And the second part of that is, if you raise money on your own, you raise $10,000 and your budget ends up being $50,000, you take that to another angel investor or a regular investor, and you say, I already have this commitment. I already have a community of X amount of people that want to buy it as soon as it's ready, and this is what we're looking for, and this is what, we spent some time in the beginning and actually put some revenue projections together. So here are those. I'm seeing this actually tied together a lot better than I thought it would. And that's a much easier conversation. So you get initial investment that you can, and then before you spend that, you put a plan together and take that to somebody else, and that you eliminate the risks for them along the way, and then you'll get some decent investment, especially if you keep it to a size or a reasonable budget. On that topic, if you are in Ohio, there is a super awesome thing that someone sitting to your far right can help you with, called the Ohio Motion Picture, I'm going to screw this up and he's going to kill me for it, tax credit, that can do the exact same thing. We have used similar things in the past, and it's a state tax credit, but what is most valuable for people like me is that exact scenario. You take that X amount of dollars that you raise on your own, you have a little bit of a plan together, you approach them, and you say, oh, by the way, we have an X% tax credit on top of it, and their risk starts plummeting, and that conversation changes from, I don't know, oh, really? Maybe, let me, and then you can push the buttons and make that happen.
Also, I wanted to say too, really quick, if you are thinking about investors and are thinking about actual angel or VC, and you've not done any pitch things before, go to pitch events, watch people do it. Shark Tank does not count. But in some ways it is very similar, because they will grill you on everything. They want numbers. Because part of it is they want to know what they're going to get out of it. They're not just giving you free money to play around with. even though that would be really cool, but that's just not what it is. So you have to have a good amount of stuff behind it to do that, and they're very interested in making sure that they can get something out of it as well. And so it's a very, very different process than doing it otherwise. So
Can I ask a question here? How many of you are familiar with lean startup or MVPs? Okay, when we talk about treating your game like a business, you treat it like a startup business. It's the exact same approach. The crossovers are perfectly identical. Look into Eric Rees and the Lean Startup. There's a whole group of local groups and meetup groups that go over this on a regular basis, and that's an excellent way to prepare yourself. They talk about something called a minimum viable product, which is the least you need in order to get it out and get validation that that's a good game that you're going to want to make, and you take that to an investor, and you're already like 20% of the way there, and it's a whole different story again. So, yep.
And just a general piece of advice, when you are making pitches, when you are talking to investors, be professional, be clean, wear deodorant, wear clothes that are also clean and smell like deodorant. I can't tell you how many folks I've run into who don't get that they should be professional when they're asking for money. That really matters.
Yeah, you're
have
cool.
Business cards, please.
They don't care about your cool indie cred.
I wear hoodies and flip-flops like 7 days a week, and I do put on a suit for that.
Yeah, but your hoodies are clean, though. That's the difference.
No, they're not.
So we had another question, sorry.
It's straight up 5%.
So it's 5%. So
Yeah,
all-
5% off that. The difference with that is you need to consider the cost of the actual fulfillment. So the fulfillment of the items and the cost of the items themselves. We've budgeted something like about 10% for that, but obviously that's going to increase if it's a lower budget and decrease if it's a higher budget, especially if you can do a lot more digital in-game fulfillment or items, reward items. That'll benefit it. But yeah, theirs is a straight 5% off the top, and then the cost of actual delivering the rewards. So that's one of the things that comes about. Speaking a little bit about the IP stuff, that was a surprise to people who are not familiar with Kickstarter or familiar with games when you're going to business with them. If you raise $500,000, the fact that you don't actually get $500,000 from that was a bit of a surprise to them. And if you're talking about raising $500,000 and there are legal deals involved with that, you need to make sure that everyone understands that they don't get $500,000.
Yeah, and not forgetting the physical rewards and shipping costs money is also a big thing that people tend to forget when they're doing Kickstarter, because they hear $500,000, they think they're getting $500,000. They don't think to remember, like, oh wait, but there's actual overhead involved. I have to pay for the T-shirts before I can send them out. I have to ship them. I might have to ship them internationally. That costs 5 times as much. I didn't know I had such a great Indonesian fan base, and now I have the money. It's the kind of thing where planning a little bit ahead of time really makes a big difference on the back end.
Also taxes too, right?
That's another big one.
So, taxes. Kickstarter funds are counted as revenue. There's no way around it. So, again, treat a Kickstarter like a business. That's what it is. It's going to take time and thought. One of the things you can really think about, especially if you're starting your business, it may work for you, is what I should say, is timing. So if you talk to an accountant, they can give you a recommendation on this for sure. I should not really advise you to do that. But if you're, doing a Kickstarter and you're going to raise a couple $100,000, and that Kickstarter might happen to end in November, guess what? Come January 15th, you are expected to pay taxes on that, and in the U.S. and the state of Ohio and stuff like that. So it might help when you're forming your business, if you're doing it at the same time as you're planning a Kickstarter, consider changing your fiscal year, because then you have 12 months following the raising those funds to disperse those funds in order to offset some revenue costs. That was a little tip that we came up with.
Do we have any more questions?
Because it'll be the game that they saw yesterday, not 5 years ago. They've been seeing it for 5 years and waiting it for 5 years. And you might find that you have some opportunity in there to release different things. You might be able to release some physical, prints or something like that to raise some funds or something like that. Some in between stuff. So absolutely, always start building the community first thing, and it's only going to benefit you in the end.
Also, it's about trust too. I mean, if you're saying every year, oh no, the game's coming out this year for sure, you guys, and then you don't release it, yeah, your community is going to get really mad at you. It's the trust is probably the most, even more so than money sometimes, is incredibly important. Because it's all about how you interact with that community. And I've seen lots of situations where people have violated that trust. No Man's Sky. And to me, it's a marketing nightmare because all of a sudden you've seen XYZ come out, and the reality of it is very different. That's really bad. And that's not only really bad because now you have this giant community who's turned on you, but it's really bad because, again, that the currency that you've built this community with is trust. And when you essentially open the bank vault and go, oh, just kidding, there is no trust left in our thing, yeah. So yes, you're right. I can understand where you're coming from. That's, how could I do this? At some point, wouldn't they get tired of it? They won't if you're honest, if you work with them, and if you share literally everything, because they do want to see everything. Really, they do. So.
And well, I mean, and different people want to see different things, so you should just share as much as you can. If you're sharing art, artists will eat that up. But you share some really tech stuff about the programming engine you're using and the kind of stuff and you're going to get people who are really interested in that. So even if it's not your thing, your community or your audience might be into that kind of stuff. So. Life. It's a direct extension of playtesting. Yeah, that's even better. I mean, you get community involvement, and then you're literally making a game for the audience before the game's even made. It's amazing. Live streaming is a great way to go, even if that works for artists doing renderings, doing hand illustrations for coders. It's the craziest thing because I'm a pure coder and nobody wants to see me do that, but they love it. So I don't know why. You watch me for 6 hours. I don't think you can follow any of the code that I'm writing, but sure, why not? You're going to watch me.
And they do.
They do. It's crazy.
Okay, I think we've got time for one more question. Oh, come on. Who's going to close out the day? We need one more right there.
Can I have a couple hundred of your business cards, and I'll go out there and take care of it for you.
I think you're in the right place.
Yeah.
Hey, there you go, right there. See?
Yeah.
There you go. Who needs accounting advice?
So, and part of it too is I think that it goes literally off what you're saying. I'm not a developer. I can't write code for shit. But it's going to those communities and being able to say here are services that I can provide, whether it's a co-op like what Keith has. Ross and I are a part of a co-op in Chicago that we talk to all the time. It's being able to go to that and say, listen, I love the community. Here's what I can offer. Being a part of those groups in a separate way is really exciting, and those groups have been more than inviting, especially as someone, I don't make games, but I love them, and I love helping people make games. So.
When you ask to join the Cleveland Game Co-op, there is a question that I make everyone fill out ahead of time. It is, what do you do? And some of the options for that are, artists, musicians, sound effects, and waffle making. Because freaking waffles are awesome, and every once in a while you need some waffles. But that doesn't mean you don't have to be a developer to provide waffles to game developers, right? And it's still supporting the industry. So.
You're just looking for psychics from Stranger Things, aren't you?
Yeah. So?
Exactly. Okay.
Just waffles, dude.
Just the waffles.
Just want waffles.
I think we've got about a couple minutes left. So, Tom, how about you tell us about what else you're up to this weekend and where we can find you and your upcoming projects. Where can we learn more about Tom?
Sounds good. So you can go ahead and follow me or email me if you want more information about that. I also have a booth on the City View level?
The City View floor.
Yes, I'm currently sharing a booth with the Video Game Art Gallery. We split one. And you can come down and find out a little bit more about my company and what we do. And also you can get chocolate for answering a couple questions, so if you want candy. But upcoming this weekend, we're going to be hanging out there. I also have another talk tomorrow at 2:30 about video game economies. So if you are interested in that sort of stuff and want to know more about how to get started on that, or just more about video game economies in general, you can come check that out.
All right. Keith, same question.
Yeah. So you can find me wandering around the Games in Cleveland Mega Booth for at least the next 48 hours or so. Yeah, I'll probably be here very late on Sunday. But in general, the most important thing that I do is the Cleveland Game Co-op and supporting the Cleveland video game industry. I am happy to extend that to anybody, any type of services. The co-op supports, promotes, and connects and markets for all of our game studios, developers, indie, professional, amateur, whatever, in Cleveland, in the hopes to take hobbyists or small studios and grow them and be professional and grow into full-fledged, full-time studios. So you can hit me up at Playview, which is my company, which is what I do, or the Cleveland Game Co-op, or just tap me on the back. Always here to help.
My name is Ross Hersemann. You can find me at loadinglaw.com. So that's my Twitter handle and also my website and my law firm page. And tomorrow I'll be having a talk on fair use, YouTube, and fan-made games, legal implications of copyright, right in this room at 3:30, and I'll also be at the VGA booth at the City Walk for the rest of the weekend. But you guys have been an awesome audience. Thank you so much for coming out.
Thanks, guys.